Welcome to the Deep Dive, the show built entirely around your curiosity. We take a stack of dense sources, articles, research papers, ancient texts, and we give you that ultimate shortcut to being genuinely well-informed.
And today we're taking a really profound step back in time.
Thousands of years, right?
Thousands. We're looking at a science of formation that predates pretty much all of modern medicine.
And this is about human prenatal development.
Yes, as it was documented really meticulously in the ancient Buddhist tradition.
It's an amazing set of source material we're jumping into. We're not just looking at, philosophical ideas.
No, not at all. What we're examining is basically a high-resolution, ancient embryological treatise.
And it comes from a few key places.
Primarily from the Indakasutta, and then later it's elaborated on in this incredibly vivid and expensive commentary, the Sāratthappakāsinī.
And these texts, they don't just talk about it in general terms, they categorize the whole process.
Week by week. It's a subtle, week-by-week transformation of a new life. And it manages to blend this deep metaphysics, the role of karma, with surprisingly accurate morphology.
So our mission today, for you, is to peel all of those layers back. We really want to understand how an ancient civilization, without a microscope, without an ultrasound, managed to map out the creation of a new life.
And the metaphors they used are they're stunning.
Right. What did they use to describe these stages you can't even see? And maybe most importantly, how did they weave the physical body's creation step by step with a spiritual concept like kama or karma?
Well, we have to start with the philosophical question that sets the whole thing up. The Buddha's entire explanation is triggered by this really challenging fundamental question.
And this comes from a spirit named Indaka.
Yes, Indaka approaches the Buddha and he asks about the very mechanics of existence.
Okay, let's unpack this because it sounds like the core dilemma. Indaka is basically asking the Buddha to clarify a contradiction.
He is. He says, in essence, the enlightened beings, they teach that the physical form, the rūpa, is just a compound. It's not the actual life or consciousness, the jivanti.
So if the body isn't the life, then what is it? And how does a new consciousness even get a body in the first place?
That's the question. He asked, how does this new consciousness come to possess the body? And very specifically, how is that physical framework, that initial lump of bones, formed and structured inside the essence of the womb?
Wow, he's asking for the operating manual for incarnation.
That's a great way to put it. If life depends on consciousness, and consciousness is separate from matter, then who or what is the architect of the matter?
The body is just a vessel, but who builds it? And what decides what it looks like?
Exactly. And that question sets the stage for the Buddha's response, which fascinatingly isn't just a spiritual answer. He provides a vivid, detailed 7-day cycle of physical transformation.
Complete with terminology and metaphors that, as we'll see, let us draw these direct comparisons to modern embryology.
It's that structure, that logic, that's so key here. It's a blueprint for biology, but it's anchored in a metaphysical reality.
And we are going to navigate that ancient blueprint step by step. So, the first thing that really jumps out from the commentary Buddhaghosa's Sāratthappakāsinī is the timeline. It's so rigid.
It's not a general progression at all. It's this insistent, consistent pattern built on a 7-day cycle.
That feels almost clinical.
It's a critical organizing principle in the text. It establishes that development happens in these discrete 7-day stages. And this precision is tied to the idea of transformation itself.
What do you mean by that?
Well, crucially, at the end of those 7 days, the text says the previous name and the previous form of the entity completely disappear.
So it's not just changing, it's becoming something entirely new each week.
Exactly. It matures and takes on a new name and a new distinct physical structure. It's a process of weekly morphological metamorphosis, and it seems to be structured around the lunar cycle.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Stage 1, the first 7 days.
Precisely. This is the kalala. The Buddha describes it simply as a drop-like substance.
A drop. Okay.
But the commentary, in its typical style, doesn't just leave it at that. It elaborates really beautifully on the physical nature of this drop to help us visualize something microscopic.
And this is where those memorable, almost sensory details come in.
They do. The ancient metaphor for the kalala is wonderfully pure. It's likened to one of two things: either a tiny, minute drop of sesame oil floating in water,
suggesting it's transparent, separate from its environment.
Yes, or even more evocatively, a clear, pure drop of ghee or clarified butter.
Ghee! I love that. It's so specific.
The Pali phrase is tila kalasa yata bindu sapimando anavilo. And the key word is anavilo, which means clear, pure, untroubled.
So it's emphasizing the pristine nature of this first form.
It's highlighting the minute, liquid-like, almost perfect nature of it. In this description, it maps remarkably well onto what modern science calls the early zygote or the blastocyst.
Right after fertilization, when it's just this little ball of cells.
Exactly. Before it has even implanted or started any real structural differentiation. It is the purest initial droplet of life, almost imperceptible.
A high bar for purity that, I'm guessing, changes pretty quickly.
It does. After those 7 days are up, the initial Kalala form is considered to be gone. It ceased to exist, and it's replaced by stage 2.
The previous identity is just absorbed into the new one.
Yes, and this is the Buddha stage. This covers the second week. The commentary says the Kalala matures and transforms into a Buddha, a term that's translated as a small lump, or maybe more accurately, a coagulated fluid.
The descriptions here get a little less delicate than that ghee analogy, don't they?
They do. The text compares the Buddha to something like blood or flesh-washing water.
Okay, that's a big shift from a pure drop of ghee. It suggests a move away from transparency.
It certainly does. The sources note it becomes a structure that's more like a drop of thick pus or mucus. Definitely something more substantial, more opaque, and yes, less pure than the initial Kalala. The Buddha is described as a coagulated or clotted mass.
Which tells us that the form is gaining some kind of viscosity, some internal structure.
Exactly. And for a modern comparison, this shift reflects the intense cell differentiation that happens right after implantation. The first germ layers start to form, and the embryo proper begins organizing itself.
So it's moving from just a collection of cells to an intentionally structured lump.
A lump. Exactly. And that movement towards structure continues right into the third week, which is the Pesi stage.
It's no longer just coagulated fluid, so the solidification process must be really kicking in.
The Pesi stage is vital. After the 7 days of a Buddha, the form develops into Pesi, which is characterized as a fleshy lump or a soft tissue mass.
So this is where a clearer, more definite embryo-like shape starts to emerge.
Yes, it's moving past that initial blob of differentiation. And the metaphor the ancient observers chose to describe the Pesi is, I think, maybe the most vivid and unexpected one of all.
It really grounds this whole abstract process in something mundane, doesn't it?
It beautifully grounds the abstraction in a sensory reality. The Pesi is likened to a ball of mashed black pepper. Matica.
But it's not just a pepper ball. The description is way more specific.
Oh, it's highly specific. It says, village children press this pepper into a paste, they shape it into a ball, and, crucially, they leave it to dry in the sun.
That detail about drying in the sun, that seems like everything.
It is. It suggests a mass that starts out soft, but is actively solidifying, consolidating. It's starting to show external texture, maybe some rigidity.
It implies they understood this wasn't just a static thing, but a process. The slow loss of moisture and the gain of firmness.
They saw it was dynamic. The form moved from a pure droplet to a coagulated mess, and now to an intentionally shaped, soft mass that is actively drying.
I find that incredible. It's an observation of a chemical change, of something hardening over time.
Exactly, and that consolidation sets us up perfectly for the fourth stage, where it becomes genuinely solid and defined.
So the transition from Pesi brings us to the Dana stage. This is the end of the first lunar month, the fourth week.
Right, and Gana means solid, dense, or compact. This is the solid mass of flesh, or mamsapinda.
And this is the first stage that gets a definitive, complex shape as its comparison.
Yes, a structural milestone. The text likens the Gana directly to the shape of a hen's egg, Cucus endosynthana.
That comparison, the hen's egg, that really demands attention. Why an egg?
Well, it signifies that the form is now a firm, consolidated embryonic mass. The text says it's samantaparamandalam, rounded uniformly on all sides.
So by the end of the fourth week, it's not amorphous anymore. It has a clear, dense, symmetrical, kind of ovoid shape.
Precisely. And this consolidation is absolutely necessary because, as the text tells us, this stable, rounded mass is the precursor for the next major transformation.
Which is?
The development of appendages, the full body axis. Without achieving the Gana, the body can't begin to branch out.
So the 7-day cycle is like a biological clock, dictating not just the form, but its very identity from week to week. From that tiny droplet, the Kalala, all the way to this consolidated, self-contained, egg-shaped mass, the Gana, all in the first 28 days.
And on a material level, it answers Indaka's original question. The framework starts as a solid egg, formed through 4 stages of progressive solidification.
Okay, so that stable consolidation you mentioned, the Ghana stage, that's the launch pad.
It's the philosophical and the morphological launch pad for the entire rest of the body structure. We're now moving past that fundamental cell differentiation and into recognizable embryonic morphology.
The beginning of the actual human shape.
Yes. So let's talk about the emergence of limbs, the development of branches.
Mm-hmm.
This is where that abstract solid mass starts to look like something we can identify.
Something distinctly human.
Indeed. The text is very clear that from the Ghana, the Pazaka, which means branches or limbs, develop.
And this starts at a very specific time.
Very specific. In the 5th week, Panyakame Sate. And again, the source material is incredibly precise. It says 5 small protrusions or swellings appear. Pandikapilaka.
And these 5 protrusions are identified as the essential structure, the beginnings of the 2 hands, the 2 feet, and the head. This is the moment the blueprint becomes visible.
It's the crucial step of morphological structuring. But this is where the philosophical framework, which is really the heart of the sutta, slams directly into the biology.
How so?
The Buddhist teaching explicitly states that these 5 embryonic protrusions arise due to kama.
Okay, that can't be overstated. Let's unpack that. It means that the mere fact the physical form exists, that's conditioned by all sorts of things. The mother's diet, material inheritance, whatever.
Right.
But the specific essential blueprint, the exact moment the hands, feet, and head are structurally designated, that's directly driven by karmic influence.
Kama is responsible for generating the structured physical form. The structural milestones are kama conditioned.
So this is the answer to Indaka's question about where the structure comes from. The consciousness doesn't just grab a body.
No. The structure itself is being physically configured and shaped by the past volitional actions, the kama of the being that is entering the womb. The text confirms the consciousness enters into the womb due to conditions and not without it. And the primary condition is kama.
So kama is like the non-material energy that decides where on that little egg-shaped Ghana the head and limbs are going to sprout.
It is the director of the physical architecture.
The director of the structural milestones. Okay, so we've set the blueprint in week 5. How does the commentary account for the next 9 months of growth?
Right, it has to get from week 5 to full term, so it sort of telescopes the development, focusing on the ultimate signs of completion and refinement.
A transition from creating the structure to refining it.
Exactly. So the full external features that define the complete human form,
Yeah.
the hair, Kesayosika, the body hair, Loma, and the nails, Naka, are all explicitly connected to the 42nd week, Vakatalis Sate.
42 weeks? That's 10.5 lunar months, so it rounds out the full gestation period.
It does. And this reinforces that the entire process happens gradually, not instantly. Naika Paharnan, Ivani Batati. These are all late-stage features. They represent the full maturation and hardening of the form, culminating in that 10-month period the ancient observers defined.
So the initial shape is set very early, but the fine details, like hair and nails, take almost the entire time to develop.
Right.
But that only covers the formation and the timing. Indaka asked a second critical question, didn't he? How does the being sustain itself inside the womb?
Yes, this is where the ancient physiological model comes in. It's critical because the being is completely cut off from any external food.
So how did they explain it?
The Buddha's explanation is very practical. Whatever the mother eats, anapanayakopajana, food and drink consumed, through that, the being sustains itself there.
The observation is simple. The mother's diet is the source of nutrition. But the mechanism of transfer, that's what they had to explain.
And they did, with this incredibly evocative analogy. They described the mechanical connection between the fetus's navel and the mother's uterine wall.
What we would call the umbilical cord.
Right, and they compare it to a hollow lotus stalk, Upaladandako via Cheeto.
A lotus stalk. That's brilliant. It's hollow, it's flexible, and it's perfectly designed to channel fluids from the mud up to the flower. A genius analogy for nutrient transport.
It's a functional analogy. Through this hollow stalk, the nutrient fluid, which in Pali is called ahara raso, the essence of food circulates.
And this nutrient fluid is what drives the growth.
Yes, it gives rise to the continued growth of the body, which the text calls ahara samudena rūpam samudlipeti, the matter arising from sustenance.
So they had a clear ancient recognition that the fetus is entirely reliant on the mother's intake, transferred via a specific hollow channel.
And that this constant input is what drives most of the growth after that initial karmic blueprint is set.
Which means we have 2 primary drivers for the physical body. There's the initial structure, which is driven by kama, and then the continuing growth and maintenance, which is driven by ahara raso.
That distinction becomes absolutely vital when we get to the philosophical heart of this.
All right, so to really get into the deepest insights of the sutta, we have to go back to that high philosophy, back to Indaka's original question.
Yes, his inquiry about the relationship between rūpa, the physical form or matter, and jivanti, the consciousness or life.
If the body is just an assembly of parts, what determines the structure and what breathes the specific life into that structure?
In the Buddhist framework, the manifestation of any life stream is governed by this principle of dependent origination, paticca.
Nothing arises without conditions.
Nothing. And in this context, the physical body is conditioned by a range of forces. They're known as vilutana, or origins of matter. And these sources of matter are divided into four main categories.
Okay, what are they?
They are kama, actions and intentions, sita, mind or consciousness, utu, temperature in the physical environment, and ahara, sustenance or food.
And for a developing fetus, not all of these apply in the same way, I assume.
That's right. The developing fetus is matter driven by three of these four forces. You have kama, which is the blueprint. You have utu, which is the biological temperature of the womb. And you have ahara, the mother's sustenance.
So now we can see the source of that distinction we were just talking about. The ancient model explicitly differentiates between kamaja rūpa matter, born of karma, and aharaja rūpa matter, born of sustenance.
That is the philosophical core. Ahara rūpa is the matter that allows the fetus to grow from week 5 onward. It's the increase in mass provided by that lotus stalk.
But kamaja rūpa is the blueprint itself. It's the non-physical moral energy that determines the physical characteristics this consciousness is conditioned to experience in this life.
Precisely.
Okay, so let's analyze those two explicit moments where kama is named as the causal force in the physical development, because this is where the metaphysics really imposes itself on the morphology.
The first mention is broad, but it's foundational. The stable, solid form, the ghana, that hen's egg shape in week 4, is described as being karma-conditioned, kamapakaya.
What does that mean, practically?
It tells us that the very ability of those initial cells to coalesce, to solidify, and to achieve a stable embryonic shape is fundamentally driven by karmic conditions.
So if the kama for that particular life stream wasn't ready,
then this solidification wouldn't happen. The being wouldn't survive that initial critical transition.
So the survival of the early vulnerable embryo is itself karmically determined, and the second mention is more like a structural directive.
Exactly. The formation of those 5 protrusions, the limb and head buds that appear in the 5th week, is said to arise specifically due to kama.
This establishes kama not just as a reason for existence, but as the underlying blueprint, the mechanism that drives the structuring.
It controls the key, decisive milestones of biological development.
Now, this is where, for a modern learner, a real tension comes up. Because when we look at this structurally, we immediately think of modern genetics.
Of course.
We understand that physical characteristics, the ability to form 5 limbs, hair color, inherited diseases, are passed down through DNA. So if kama dictates the blueprint, doesn't that fundamentally conflict with the idea of material inheritance and genetics?
This is a really profound and necessary tension to explore. The ancient model isn't denying material components. It acknowledges the raw materials provided by the parents, by the mother's food.
But it views the source of the arrangement differently.
Completely differently. Modern genetics dictates how a characteristic is physically coded and transmitted through material inheritance, through DNA. The Buddhist concept of kama determines why that specific life stream is conditioned to manifest that specific genetically possible structure in the first place.
Okay. So kama is the ultimate condition that selects which genetic possibilities will manifest for this particular consciousness. It's like the director choosing the script, and genetics is the language the script is written in.
That is a powerful analogy. If you have a vast library of potential genetic outcomes from the parent's DNA, kama is the non-material energy that selects, activates, and directs the structural milestones.
So, for instance, if a being has the karmic condition to be very tall,
that kama will drive the developmental process to select for the relevant genetic possibilities that are inherent in the parent's material contribution. And if the kama is strongly conditioned toward, say, suffering or a specific physical limitation, that dictates the specific physical configuration that will manifest.
So in this ancient worldview, the specific shape, the configuration that emerges from those early stages, it's not accidental, it's not just a random genetic shuffle.
No, it's the inevitable unfolding of past volitional actions directing the physical forces of the present.
And it completely resolves Indaka's conundrum. The consciousness enters, and the conditions it carries, its karma, immediately start the construction process. It instructs the raw materials to form the particular body, the rūpa, that this consciousness is destined to inhabit.
It's a complete philosophical and structural model.
It also gives me a deeper appreciation for that hen's egg metaphor, that rounded, stable Ghana stage. It isn't just a convenient shape.
No, it's the first moment of karma conditioned stability. It's the final point before the actual blueprint, the 5 protrusions, starts to be laid out in week 5. So having explored that philosophical foundation, we can now really appreciate the stunning accuracy of the ancient observations. We have this clear, documented 7-day cycle with named stages.
Let's do it. Let's place that ancient high-resolution timeline right next to our modern embryological knowledge. This is that aha moment where you see the ancient world's capacity for just meticulous deduction.
Let's start with that first transition, the purest form.
Okay, Kalala, ancient week 1. The minute drop-like form, like clear ghee or sesame oil.
Modern alignment. This perfectly covers the period right after fertilization. You have the zygote, the rapid cell divisions called cleavage, and the formation of the blastocyst, which is a fluid-filled sphere of cells.
The key observation is that it's microscopic and liquid-like.
Right. To define this period by its minute fluid nature, using metaphors of pure oil and ghee, it shows this incredible understanding of the initial state of matter.
Okay, now the shift into week 2, where the description conceptually changes from pure to coagulated.
A Buddha, ancient week 2. The coagulated mass or fluid, like flesh-washing water, this implies a structure that's losing its initial purity, its homogeneity.
And in modern terms, week 2 is when?
By this point, the blastocyst is implanted, and the crucial process of forming the bilaminar disc is happening. Cell differentiation is accelerating, laying down the groundwork for the 3 primary germ layers, ectoderm, mesoderm, and endoderm.
So that shift from a simple, pure drop to a more complex, internally differentiated structure, it aligns perfectly with the ancient description of a coagulated mass.
It does. They clearly recognize that something important changed structurally in that second week. It made the substance a lot clearer and more functional.
Okay, moving to week 3. The pasy, the fleshy lump, compared to that pounded pepper paste drying in the sun.
Modern alignment. This is week 3, the period of gastrulation. This is, arguably the single most critical structural event in embryology.
This is where those 3 germ layers reorganize and fold and form the basic body axis.
Exactly. The neural tube, which becomes the brain and spinal cord, starts to develop. And that reference to the drying paste is remarkable because it captures this concept of consolidation and the establishment of basic external rigidity that has to happen before the final shape can form.
And isn't this also when the heart starts beating, around week 3 or 4?
It is. The cardiovascular system is rapidly accelerating. So week 3 is when the system starts to solidify and actually operate.
The move from soft tissue to a functioning, consolidating mass is exactly what PC described.
It is. And then comes the Ghana, ancient week 4. The solid mass, shaped like a hen's egg.
Modern alignment. This lines up perfectly with the end of the first month, the start of organogenesis. The embryo is still highly curved and small, but it's achieving this clear, encapsulated ovoid shape.
And to describe a microscopic embryo, which is invisible without tools, as rounded uniformly on all sides, samanta perimondulum, and having the definite shape of a hen's egg, that requires an incredible leap of deduction.
They must have been basing it on comparative knowledge, maybe from early animal development.
It's very likely. It's a visual affirmation of structural integrity. If they had to use a known object to describe the unseen, the hen's egg shape suggests they understood the embryo was now firm, self-contained, and ready for the next stage.
And that next stage is the blueprint itself, week 5.
Ancient week 5. The appearance of the 5 protrusions for the hands, feet, and the head.
Modern alignment. Limb buds, which are the predecessors of the arms and legs, appear around week 5, and head and brain development accelerates rapidly.
So the ancient text's designation of the appearance of these 5 fundamental structural elements aligns almost perfectly with the modern developmental timetable.
It confirms that the 7-day sequencing they used was based on really astute observation or deduction of structural change.
It does. And finally, that smooth transition to completion. Ancient week 42, 10 lunar months. The development of hair, body hair, and nails. 10
lunar months. It aligns almost perfectly with the modern 38 to 40 weeks of full-term gestation.
It does. And the observation that features of external refinement hair, nails, fingerprints appear later in the process is biologically accurate. It reflects that shift from initial organ formation the first trimester to maturation and weight gain in the second and third.
The ancient framework clearly distinguished between the rapid, essential structural shaping of the first 5 weeks and the slow, gradual process of completion that followed.
The synthesis is genuinely stunning. When you strip away the philosophical layers, the core biological descriptions, the tiny droplets, the coagulated fluid, the soft lump, the solid egg, and the 5 buds, they follow a logical, sequential, and time-accurate progression.
A progression that modern embryology, informed by centuries of technological advancement, basically confirms.
What's fascinating is that they didn't just guess. They used a high-resolution, week-by-week sequencing system. It speaks to this deep, sustained intellectual curiosity about the processes of life and manifestation.
They demanded an orderly, conditioned, logical explanation for how physical form arises.
And that leads us right back to the most complex layer of this deep dive, the fact that this entire system is designed to provide a complete framework for life in the womb.
How the being gets there, what it turns into, the 7-day stages, and how it is maintained, ahara raso, via the lotus stalk.
So we've covered a vast distance today, haven't we? Moving from a really deep philosophical challenge all the way to detailed biological timetables.
We really have. Let's briefly recap the critical takeaways of our deep dive into the Indakasutta and its commentary.
We began with Indaka's challenging question about how consciousness possesses physical form.
And the answer was structured around those 4 essential stages of early formation. Kalala, the clear drop, Abuddha, the coagulated fluid, Pesi, the drying pepper paste, and Ghana, the solid hen's egg, with each transformation taking precisely 7 days.
And we established that the being takes hold of the form because that essential physical structure, particularly the 5 protrusions for the limbs and head, is explicitly conditioned and created by karma.
That non-material force acts as the underlying blueprint, defining the morphological architecture of the new life stream.
And finally, we saw that elegant ancient physiological model for fetal sustenance. The mother's nourishment, the ahara raso, is transferred to the growing life via the umbilical cord.
Visualized through that perfect analogy of the hollow lotus stalk, upala dandako via Chido.
The entire framework provides a clear, high-resolution structure for understanding this complex material. It fuses meticulous, week-by-week biological observation with a powerful, comprehensive philosophical system, all centered on conditioned existence. So we started this deep dive with the premise that the physical form is not life itself. Given the ancient teaching that the key markers of physical development, those 5 protrusions, arise directly from karma, and that the entire physical structure is karma conditioned. What does this suggest to you about the relationship between philosophical conditions and physical manifestation?
Well, it raises the ultimate question, doesn't it? If the specific structural blueprint of the body is driven not by random chance, but by the momentum of past actions, where does the mere material component of existence end? And where does our essential defining physical nature truly begin?
It makes us question whether we are simply the result of material assembly.
Or if every single step of our earliest formation is an echo of the past, dictating the shape of the present. That is something worth mulling over. Thank you for joining us on the deep dive. We'll see you next time.